The morning sun cast golden rays across the sprawling gardens of Cliffside Resort, where the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beyond manicured lawns and pristine white gazebos. It was supposed to be the perfect day. After 8 years of military service across 3 different combat zones, Sergeant Riley Viper Lawson was finally trading her tactical gear for a wedding dress, her calloused hands for delicate lace gloves, and her radio call sign for the simple title of Mrs. Reed. Riley stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, studying her reflection with the same analytical precision she'd once used to assess hostile territory. The ivory silk gown hugged her athletic frame, carefully concealing the network of scars that told the story of her service. A small one near her collarbone from shrapnel in Afghanistan, another along her left shoulder from a knife fight in Syria. The makeup artist had done an exceptional job covering the faint marks, but Riley could still see them. She always could. "You look absolutely radiant," her mother Grace Lawson said from behind her, adjusting the delicate pearl necklace that had belonged to Riley's grandmother. Grace's eyes were bright with tears of joy, but also tinged with relief. For years, she'd worried her daughter would never make it home from one of those deployments. Through the window, Riley could see the wedding guests beginning to arrive. Nathan Reed, her groom and the love of her life, had insisted on a large celebration, despite Riley's preference for something more intimate. As a successful tech entrepreneur who'd never served in the military, Nathan wanted to honor Riley's service by inviting her entire former unit along with his extensive network of business associates and family friends. The guest list had created an interesting dynamic. On one side were Riley's fellow veterans, men and women who understood the weight of what she had carried overseas. On the other were Nathan's colleagues and friends, successful civilians, who viewed military service through the lens of Hollywood movies and patriotic rhetoric, but had never experienced the reality of combat. Then there were the active duty military personnel. Nathan had thought it would be meaningful to invite several officers from the nearby Marine base, including Captain Michael Bennett, who'd served in the same theater as Riley, but had never worked directly with her unit. Bennett was everything the Marine Corps loved to showcase. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a chest full of ribbons and the kind of commanding presence that looked perfect in recruitment videos. A knock at the door interrupted Riley's thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting to see her maid of honor. Instead, Colonel James Iron Lawson entered resplendent in his dress blues. At 62, her father still carried himself with the rigid posture and quiet confidence that had made him a legend among special forces. His weathered face, lined by decades of sun and stress from multiple deployments, broke into a rare smile as he saw his daughter. "There she is," he said softly, "the strongest soldier I've ever trained." "Dad." Riley turned to embrace him, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "I thought you were helping Nathan greet the guests." "I was," Colonel Lawson replied, his expression darkening slightly. "But I needed a break from Captain Bennett and his stories about what real combat leadership looks like." Riley felt her jaw tighten. "He's still at it then?" "Some men can't help but hear themselves talk," her father replied with the quiet restraint of someone who'd survived both Desert Storm and the early days of Afghanistan. Especially men who've never had their theories tested under real fire. Through the window, they could see Bennett holding court with a group of younger officers and several of Nathan's business associates. His voice carried across the garden with the practiced projection of a man accustomed to commanding attention. "The thing about modern warfare," Bennett was saying, gesturing with a champagne flute, "is that it requires a certain psychological resilience that not everyone possesses. Combat isn't about following a checklist or completing a training exercise. It's about making life or death decisions under pressure that would break most people." Colonel Lawson shook his head, turning away from the window. "I've known men like Bennett my entire career. All talk, minimal action. The real professionals never need to tell everyone how good they are." Riley nodded, a shared understanding passing between father and daughter. She had grown up on military bases, raised primarily by her father after her mother's death when she was 12. Colonel Lawson had taught her everything he knew, from tactical movement to weapon handling, survival skills to strategic thinking. When she enlisted at 21, it surprised no one who knew the Lawsons. "Today isn't about the Michael Bennetts of the world," Riley said, smoothing her dress. "It's about starting a new chapter." Her father studied her for a moment, his blue eyes searching. "Are you sure about this civilian life, Riley? You were born for service. It's in your blood." It was a conversation they'd had many times since she'd announced her engagement to Nathan. Colonel Lawson had never explicitly disapproved, but his reservations about her transition to civilian life were evident. "I've served my country for 80 years, Dad. I've completed 3 tours. I've earned the right to build something different." "Of course you have," he agreed quickly. "But I worry that Nathan doesn't fully understand who you are, what you've done, what you're capable of." Before Riley could respond, they heard Bennett's voice rise again from the garden below. "Take Sergeant Lawson, for instance," he was saying. "Solid enough soldier, I'm sure, but 8 years isn't really long enough to understand the full complexity of military operations. Most of us are just getting started at that point." Riley felt her father tense beside her. "Plus, let's be honest," Bennett continued. "The standards for women in combat roles, well, they're not exactly the same as what men face. Different physical requirements, different expectations. It's not their fault, it's just biology." One of Nathan's college friends, who'd never served a day in uniform, looked uncomfortable. "But didn't she serve in Afghanistan and Syria? That sounds pretty intense." Bennett waved dismissively. "Sure, she was deployed to those regions, but being deployed and being in actual combat are two different things. Most support personnel never see real action. They stay on base, handle logistics, maybe do some convoy escort duty. It's important work, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same as leading men into battle." Riley felt her jaw clench involuntarily. She'd been in more firefights than Bennett would see in his entire career, had made tactical decisions that saved dozens of lives, and earned her Bronze Stars through actions that most soldiers would consider extraordinary. Colonel Lawson placed a steadying hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Don't let him get to you. Men like that aren't worth your energy." "I know," Riley said, taking a deep breath. "But it's frustrating that on today of all days I still have to deal with that kind of attitude." "Welcome to being a woman in the military," a new voice said from the doorway. Riley turned to see her maid of honor, Captain Rebecca Chen, standing there in her bridesmaid dress. Chen had served with Riley during her second deployment, their friendship forged in the crucible of combat operations that people like Bennett could never understand. "The ceremony starts in 30 minutes, Chen said, glancing at her watch. "Nathan is getting nervous." "Tell him I haven't run off to rejoin my unit," Riley joked, though the thought had crossed her mind more than once during the wedding planning. As Colonel Lawson and Chen stepped out to give Riley a final moment alone, she returned to the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked like a fairy tale princess, all silk and lace and delicate beauty. But beneath the wedding dress, Riley could still feel the coiled strength in her muscles, the instinctive awareness of exits and potential threats, the mental catalog of improvised weapons that could be fashioned from seemingly innocent objects. Old habits died hard, but today she told herself they could die quietly. The garden ceremony had gone off without a hitch. Riley and Nathan had exchanged vows beneath a white wooden archway adorned with cascading roses and baby's breath, while 200 guests looked on with tears of joy and appreciation. The Pacific Ocean provided a stunning backdrop, its waves gently lapping against the cliffs below as seabirds wheeled overhead in the afternoon sunshine. Now, as the cocktail hour commenced on the resort's expansive terrace, Riley found herself navigating a social minefield that felt almost as treacherous as the combat zones she'd left behind. Captain Bennett stood near the bar, still holding court with a group of younger officers and several of Nathan's business associates. His dress uniform was immaculate, every ribbon and medal positioned with mathematical precision. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of authority that commanded attention from everyone within earshot. "The reality of modern special operations," Bennett was saying, "is that command decisions often mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. In my experience, the psychological pressure of knowing your choices determine whether your men live or die is something that requires years of progressive leadership responsibilities to prepare for." Lieutenant Murphy, another active duty officer who'd been invited, nodded in agreement. "Plus, let's be honest, the standards for women in combat roles, well, they're not exactly the same as what men face. Different physical requirements, different expectations." Riley approached the group slowly, hoping to simply grab a glass of water and move on to speak with her family members. But Bennett's next words stopped her in her tracks. "I'm sure Sergeant Lawson performed admirably in whatever support capacity she served in. The military needs all types of personnel to function effectively." Support capacity. The word stung like a physical blow. During her final deployment, Riley had led a 12-person joint special operations team on a high-risk extraction mission deep behind enemy lines. They'd successfully rescued 3 American hostages while neutralizing 27 hostile combatants without taking a single casualty. That mission alone had earned her a Silver Star. "Excuse me, gentlemen," Riley said, stepping into the circle with a polite smile. "I just wanted to thank you all for coming to celebrate with us today." The group turned toward her with varying expressions of surprise and embarrassment. Bennett recovered first, his military bearing automatic even in social situations. "Congratulations, Sergeant Lawson," he said with a tight smile. "Beautiful ceremony. You make a lovely bride." "Thank you, Captain Bennett. I hope you're enjoying the reception." "Absolutely," Bennett nodded. "Great venue choice. Must be nice to have this kind of celebration after." He paused as if searching for the right words. "After the stress of military life. I imagine civilian life will be much more relaxing for you." The implication was clear. Military life had been too demanding for her, and she was retreating to easier circumstances. Riley maintained her smile, though her fingers tightened slightly around her water glass. "Different challenges, certainly, but I'm looking forward to new adventures with Nathan." Lieutenant Murphy stepped forward with the kind of patronizing smile she'd seen 1,000 times before. "That's a smart move. Know when you've reached your limits. Not everyone's cut out for a full military career. 20 years is a long time." "I'm sure Sergeant Lawson served with distinction," Bennett said carefully. "All I'm saying is that 8 years gives you a certain perspective, but it takes longer to really understand the bigger picture of military strategy and leadership." Nathan appeared at Riley's side, slipping his arm around her waist. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Riley felt the tension in her body ease slightly at his touch. Nathan Reed was everything the military wasn't, gentle, open, with his emotions focused on building rather than destroying. His tech company developed artificial intelligence systems that helped predict natural disasters and coordinate emergency responses. They'd met when Riley's unit had been assigned to provide security for a humanitarian mission using his technology. "Sorry, just thanking Captain Bennett and his colleagues for coming," Riley said, turning toward her new husband with a genuine smile. "Well, don't let me interrupt," Nathan replied, though she could see the slight discomfort in his eyes. He'd never been entirely comfortable around her military colleagues, finding their rigid formality and shared experiences alienating. "I just wanted to let you know that the first dance is in 20 minutes. As Nathan stepped away to greet other guests, Bennett continued, "As I was saying before Sergeant Lawson joined us, the nature of special operations requires a certain psychological fortitude that develops over decades of service. I've had the privilege of commanding several high-risk operations that—" "Excuse me, Captain," a deep voice interrupted. Colonel Lawson stepped into the circle, his presence immediately changing the dynamic. Even in his 60s, James Lawson carried the unmistakable aura of a man who had seen and done things that most soldiers only read about in classified briefings. "Colonel Lawson, sir," Bennett said, straightening his posture automatically, "I was just discussing the nature of special operations leadership with my colleagues." "So I heard," Colonel Lawson replied, his voice neutral, but his eyes cold. "Interesting perspective. I'm curious, though, how many actual combat operations have you commanded, Captain Bennett?" Bennett cleared his throat. "I've led 3 major operations in my career, sir. All successful." "Commendable," Colonel Lawson nodded. "And how many high-value target extractions have you personally executed?" "2, sir." "My daughter has led 17, Colonel Lawson said quietly, "including the extraction of Ambassador Williams from Damascus in 2019, an operation your superiors use as a case study at Quantico now." The group fell silent, several officers exchanging uncomfortable glances. "With all due respect, sir," Bennett said carefully, "those operations were conducted under higher command supervision. Sergeant Lawson executed orders, she didn't create strategic directives." Colonel Lawson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Captain, when my daughter was 26, she commanded a 12-person joint task force operating completely autonomous for 37 days behind enemy lines. When communications went dark and their extraction was compromised, she made the command decision to change objectives, rescued 3 additional hostages, not in the original mission parameters, and brought every single member of her team home alive." He paused, letting his words sink in. "So when you speak of psychological fortitude, and command decisions, perhaps consider that not all leadership experiences follow the same career trajectory. Some of us earn our experience through fire rather than time and grade. With that, Colonel Lawson turned to Riley. I believe your husband is looking for you. The photographer wants some shots before the first dance. As Riley walked away with her father, she could feel Bennett's eyes boring into her back. Part of her wanted to turn around and add her own achievements to her father's list, to defend her record and capabilities against Bennett's dismissive assumptions. But today wasn't about proving herself. She'd done that enough over 8 years of service. You didn't need to do that, she said quietly to her father. Probably not, he agreed, but sometimes even old soldiers can't resist a little combat. Riley laughed, feeling some of the tension drain from her shoulders. As they crossed the terrace toward the main reception area, she noticed a black sedan with tinted windows pulling into the resort's circular drive. Something about it seemed out of place among the luxury cars and SUVs driven by the other guests. Dad, did we have any additional security arrangements for today? She asked, her instincts suddenly alert. Colonel Lawson followed her gaze. Not that I'm aware of. Why? Before Riley could answer, a woman emerged from the sedan, tall and lean with close-cropped silver hair and the unmistakable bearing of a career military officer. Riley recognized her immediately. That's Major Diana Thompson, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. My former commanding officer. Razor, what's she doing here? I thought she was deployed overseas. She is, or she's supposed to be. Riley watched as Thompson scanned the venue with the practiced eye of someone assessing a tactical environment. When her gaze locked onto Riley, she gave a subtle nod. Something's wrong, Riley said, her body tensing automatically. Razor wouldn't be here unless it was important. Colonel Lawson's expression grew serious. Go, I'll make your excuses to Nathan. As Riley moved toward her former commander, she felt the familiar shift in her awareness. The heightened senses, the mental calculations, the automatic threat assessment that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. She reached Thompson just as the older woman stepped onto the terrace. Major Thompson, Riley said formally, extending her hand. This is unexpected. Sergeant Lawson, Thompson replied, her grip firm. You look beautiful. Congratulations on your marriage. But her eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of a commander about to deliver bad news. We need to talk, Thompson said quietly. Now, somewhere private. Riley led her to a small garden alcove away from the reception, her mind racing through possibilities. Had something happened to some of her former team members? Was there a security threat she needed to know about? Once they were alone, Thompson's posture changed military formality, giving way to urgent purpose. Senator Rebecca Hayes was kidnapped 3 hours ago, she said without preamble, taken from her hotel in Monterey by a professional team. Riley felt the familiar chill that preceded combat operations. Senator Hayes was the chairwoman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, privy to classified information that could compromise ongoing operations worldwide. Her kidnapping wasn't just a crime, it was a national security crisis. What's the operational status? Riley asked, her mind automatically shifting into tactical mode. FBI hostage rescue team is mobilizing, but they're 2 hours out minimum. Local law enforcement is establishing perimeters, but these aren't ordinary criminals. They've got military-grade equipment and tactical sophistication that suggests state sponsorship. Why are you here? Why now? Thompson's expression grew grim. Because we have intelligence indicating the kidnappers are heading for a safe house in Redwood Canyon, less than 20 miles from this location. She paused, clearly uncomfortable with what she had to say next. And because we need someone with your specific skill set to assist in the extraction. Riley stared at her former commanding officer, processing the implications. You're asking me to abandon my wedding reception to participate in an active hostage rescue operation. I'm asking the best reconnaissance and extraction specialist I've ever worked with to help save a United States senator whose kidnapping could compromise national security for decades. The weight of the request settled on Riley's shoulders like familiar gear. She glanced back toward the reception, where she could see Nathan laughing with his college friends, completely unaware that his new wife was being recruited for what could be the most dangerous mission of her career. There are other qualified operators available, Riley said, though even as she spoke, she knew she was grasping for alternatives. Not with your combination of regional knowledge and extraction expertise, Thompson replied firmly. You trained in those mountains, Viper. You know every trail, every tactical advantage, every potential ambush point. The FBI team is flying in blind. Through the garden paths, Riley could see the reception continuing in blissful ignorance. The band had started playing and couples were beginning to dance on the outdoor platform that had been constructed for the occasion. Captain Bennett was still holding court near the bar, probably sharing more stories about real military leadership. "This is my wedding day," Riley said quietly. "I know, and I wouldn't be here if we had any other option." Riley closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the crushing weight of duty warring with personal desire. She'd served her country for 8 years, had made sacrifices that most people couldn't imagine. Tonight was supposed to be about her future with Nathan, about building a life beyond the demands of national service. But Senator Hayes was out there somewhere, probably terrified, possibly being tortured for information that could get other Americans killed. And Riley knew with absolute certainty that she had the skills to help bring her home safely. "What's the timeline?" she asked, her decision made before the words left her mouth. "Kidnappers were spotted 90 minutes ago heading northeast. If they reach their safe house and establish defensive positions, this becomes exponentially more difficult. We need to intercept them before they go to ground." Riley looked down at her wedding dress, at the delicate lace and silk that represented everything she'd hoped civilian life could be. Peaceful, predictable, safe. Then she thought about Senator Hayes alone and afraid depending on professionals like her to bring her home safely. "I need 10 minutes to change clothes and brief Nathan." Thompson nodded grimly. "There's more Viper. The kidnapping team, they're the same cell we've been tracking for 18 months. The ones responsible for the embassy attack in Prague." Riley's blood ran cold. She remembered Prague. 3 Americans killed, including a young intelligence analyst who'd been younger than Riley was now. If the same team had Senator Hayes, they wouldn't hesitate to kill her if cornered. "Full tactical gear in my vehicle," Thompson continued. "We'll rendezvous with FBI teams at the staging area." As they walked back toward the reception, Riley's mind was already shifting into operational mode. She calculated distances, analyzed terrain, considered tactical approaches. But part of her was also breaking apart, watching her perfect wedding day dissolve into another mission, another crisis that demanded everything she had to give. Nathan was going to be devastated. Her family would be confused and worried. The guests would wonder what kind of emergency could pull a bride away from her own reception. But none of that mattered compared to the life of a United States senator and the national security implications of her kidnapping. "One more thing," Thompson said as they approached the mansion. "The FBI team leader specifically requested that no local military personnel be involved. He's concerned about operational security." Meaning? Meaning Captain Bennett and his friends can't know about this. "As far as anyone here is concerned, you're dealing with a family emergency." Riley almost smiled despite the gravity of the situation. Bennett would never know that the retired soldier he'd been dismissing all evening was about to undertake a mission that would require every skill he claimed she didn't possess. As they reached the terrace where the reception continued in full swing, Riley took one last look at the celebration that was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. In a few minutes, she would trade her wedding dress for tactical gear, her peaceful evening for potentially deadly confrontation. The irony wasn't lost on her. For years, she'd proven herself in combat zones around the world, only to be dismissed by people like Bennett who couldn't see past their prejudices. Tonight, while he danced and told stories about military leadership, she would demonstrate the kind of courage and competence that he claimed to value but couldn't recognize when it stood right in front of him. Nathan spotted her approaching and waved, his face radiant with happiness. Riley's heart broke a little more with each step toward him, knowing that in a few minutes she would have to shatter his perfect evening to answer the call of duty one more time. "Nathan, I need to speak with you privately." Riley said, her voice carefully controlled, despite the urgency coursing through her veins. Her new husband looked slightly puzzled, but followed her toward a quiet alcove near the mansion's library, away from the music and laughter of their reception. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately recognizing the tension in her shoulders that she couldn't quite hide. "You look like you did that night when you got the call about your unit being deployed early." Riley took his hands in hers, the weight of her grandmother's wedding ring feeling heavier than any tactical gear she'd ever worn. "There's been a situation. A senator has been kidnapped and they need my help with the rescue operation." Nathan stared at her for several long seconds, processing words that seemed impossible on their wedding day. "They need your help, Riley. You're retired. You're a civilian now. We just got married 3 hours ago. I know, but no. His voice was firm but not angry, filled more with protective concern than frustration. You served your country for 8 years. You've done enough. Let someone else handle this. Before Riley could respond, Captain Bennett's voice carried across the terrace as he regaled another group with military stories. The problem with short-term service members is they never develop the institutional knowledge necessary for complex operations. They learn the basics, sure, but real expertise takes decades to develop. Riley's jaw tightened as she heard Lieutenant Murphy's responding laugh. Exactly. Which is why when serious situations arise, you need people with actual command experience, not someone who's spent a few years following orders and thinks they understand strategy. Nathan followed her gaze toward the group and immediately understood the additional layer of frustration she was feeling. Riley, forget about those idiots. This is about us, about our future together. Whatever is happening, there are other qualified people who can handle it. The kidnappers are heading for terrain I know better than anyone, Redwood Canyon. I spent 6 months training there, mapping every trail, every potential ambush point. The FBI team is flying in blind. Then brief them. Give them your maps, your knowledge. You don't have to personally participate in a hostage rescue on your wedding day. From across the terrace, she could hear Thompson's voice as she spoke with several guests, maintaining her cover as a wedding attendee while steadily gathering information about local security and potential evacuation routes. Every minute they delayed increased the chances that the kidnappers would reach their safe house and establish defensive positions. Chen approached their secluded alcove, concern evident on her face. Everything okay? People are starting to ask about the first dance. Family emergency, Nathan said quickly. We just need a few minutes. Chen nodded and retreated, but not before Riley caught the worry in her expression. Soon other guests would start asking questions, wondering why the bride and groom had disappeared during their own reception. I have to do this, Riley said finally. Senator Hayes chairs the Intelligence Committee. If they extract classified information from her, it could compromise operations worldwide. American lives could be lost. And what about my life? Nathan's voice cracked with emotion. What about the life we're supposed to start together? I've already spent 3 years worrying every time your phone rang, wondering if you were being deployed again. We were supposed to be done with that. Riley felt tears threatening but forced them back. She'd learned long ago that emotions were a luxury she couldn't afford during operational planning. This is different. This is one mission, not a deployment. I'll be back before midnight. That's what you said about that reconnaissance mission in Syria that turned into a 3-week ordeal. Before she could respond, Captain Bennett's group had moved closer to their alcove, his voice now clearly audible as he continued his impromptu lecture on military leadership. The thing about extraction operations, Bennett was saying, with the confidence of someone briefing junior officers, is that they require split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. You need operators with extensive experience in hostile territory, people who've been tested in multiple combat scenarios. It's not the kind of mission you'd trust to someone with limited field experience. Lieutenant Murphy nodded sagely. Absolutely. Hostage rescue is the most demanding type of operation we conduct. One wrong decision, one moment of hesitation, and people die. You need proven leaders, not people who've spent their careers in support roles. Riley's hands clenched into fists before she consciously relaxed them. The irony was almost overwhelming. While Bennett pontificated about the qualifications needed for exactly the type of mission she was being asked to join, he remained completely oblivious to her actual capabilities. You see, Nathan said, noticing her reaction to Bennett's comments, even your fellow officers don't think you're qualified for this type of operation. Maybe that's a sign that you should let someone else handle it. Bennett doesn't know anything about my actual service record. He's making assumptions based on his years of experience and training. Nathan interrupted. Riley, I love you, but maybe it's time to acknowledge that there are some missions that require different skill sets than what you developed during your service. The words hit harder than any enemy fire she'd ever faced. Her own husband, the man who had just promised to support her through everything, was echoing the same dismissive assumptions that had followed her throughout her career. I led 17 successful extraction operations, she said quietly. I've extracted high-value targets from situations that other units couldn't handle. I've never lost a hostage. In support roles, Nathan said gently, clearly trying not to hurt her feelings while still making his point. You followed orders from more experienced commanders. This situation sounds like it needs someone who can take charge, make command decisions under pressure. From the terrace, Sullivan's voice continued. Command presence is something you're either born with or develop over decades of leadership experience. It's not something you can learn from a few years of deployment rotations. Riley stared at her husband, seeing in his eyes the same well-meaning condescension she'd encountered countless times throughout her military career. Even Nathan, who loved her and had supported her service, couldn't truly comprehend what she'd accomplished or what she was capable of achieving. I need to change clothes, she said finally, her voice emotionally flat. Riley, please don't do this. Stay here with me. Let the FBI handle it. Let the people who are trained for this type of operation. I am trained for this type of operation. She interrupted, her professional mask sliding back into place. More trained than anyone else who's currently available. Colonel Lawson appeared at the edge of the alcove, his expression somber. He had clearly been briefed by Thompson and understood the gravity of the situation. Your gear is ready, he said simply, in the guest room upstairs. Nathan looked between father and daughter, realization dawning that he was fighting a losing battle. You're supporting this, he asked Colonel Lawson incredulously. You're okay with your daughter abandoning her wedding reception for a military operation? She's not even in the service anymore. Some calls transcend official status, Colonel Lawson replied quietly. Riley has a skill set that could save American lives tonight. I raised her to answer that call no matter when it comes. Riley touched Nathan's face gently. I'll be back as soon as I can, I promise. But as she turned and walked toward the mansion, she could see in Nathan's eyes that something fundamental had changed between them. He had married a woman he thought was leaving the military life behind, only to discover on their wedding day that some identities couldn't be shed as easily as a uniform. She passed Bennett's group without a glance, their continued discussion about tactical leadership and combat experience fading into background noise as her mind shifted fully into mission preparation mode. Inside the mansion's guest bathroom, Riley carefully removed her grandmother's pearls and wedding dress, folding the ivory silk with the same methodical precision she'd once packed her combat gear. The wedding gown gave way to black, tactical clothing, body armor, and equipment harnesses that fit her like a second skin. When she looked in the mirror, the bride was gone. In her place stood Staff Sergeant Viper Lawson, ready for the most important mission of her career. Outside, she could hear the reception continuing, her absence now noticed by guests who assumed she was simply taking care of last-minute wedding details. None of them suspected that she was preparing to undertake exactly the type of high-stakes extraction operation that Bennett claimed required years of specialized experience. As she secured her tactical radio and checked her equipment, Riley felt the familiar calm that preceded dangerous missions. Personal emotions had to be compartmentalized. The mission came first and always. Senator Hayes was depending on her, even if she didn't know it yet. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. Please don't do this. I love you, but I can't watch you walk back into that world. Riley stared at the message for a long moment, then powered down the phone and slipped it into her tactical vest. There would be time for personal relationships later. Right now, she had a senator to save and a reputation to uphold, even if the people who doubted her capabilities would never know what she'd accomplished in the darkness beyond their reception lights. 20 minutes later, Riley crouched behind a granite outcropping in Redwood Canyon, her night vision goggles revealing the kidnapper's convoy stopped at a makeshift checkpoint 200 meters below. The woman who had traded her wedding dress for tactical gear was about to show the world exactly what 8 years of special operations experience could accomplish when applied with precision and purpose. The Ghost Protocol had been activated. The extraction mission had begun. Through her tactical radio, Riley heard the chaos unfolding as the FBI's hastily assembled rescue operation fell apart in real time. Alpha Team, report your position, came the stressed voice of FBI Special Agent Marcus Webb, the operation commander who'd insisted on maintaining federal jurisdiction despite having no familiarity with the terrain. We're pinned down on the North Ridge, responded Agent Sarah Chen, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Unknown number of hostiles with automatic weapons. We've got 2 agents wounded and can't advance without taking heavy casualties. Riley had predicted this exact scenario during the brief operational planning session at the staging area. The FBI team had approached the canyon using standard urban tactical procedures, treating the mountainous terrain like a city block rather than the complex three-dimensional battle space it actually was. When she tried to explain the tactical disadvantages of their planned approach route, Agent Webb had dismissed her input with the same patronizing tone she'd heard all evening at her reception. "Thank you for the local knowledge, Sergeant Lawson," Webb had said, barely glancing at the detailed terrain map she'd sketched from memory. "But we've got this handled. FBI hostage rescue team has successfully completed over 300 extraction operations. We know what we're doing." Now listening to his agents trapped in a crossfire that could have been avoided, Riley felt the familiar frustration of watching professionals make predictable mistakes because they couldn't see past their institutional arrogance. "Bravo team, can you provide covering fire for Alpha's withdrawal?" Webb's voice cracked slightly as he transmitted the order. "Negative. We're taking effective fire from elevated positions. Whoever these guys are, they know exactly what they're doing." Riley adjusted her position slightly, using her scope to identify the enemy firing positions that the FBI teams couldn't see from their compromised locations. The kidnappers had chosen their defensive positions with military precision, utilizing natural terrain features to create overlapping fields of fire that made any frontal assault suicidal. Through her earpiece, she heard Major Thompson's voice on the command frequency. "Webb, what's your status? We're running out of time here." Situation is more complex than anticipated. Enemy has superior tactical positioning and appears to have military-grade equipment. We may need to call for air support. "Air support?" Thompson's voice carried a note of disbelief. "In a hostage situation with Senator Hayes potentially in the middle of your target area." Riley keyed her radio on the tactical frequency that bypassed Webb's command channel. "Razor, this is Viper. Request permission to provide tactical assessment." Thompson's response was immediate. "Go ahead, Viper. FBI teams are advancing along predictable routes that enemy forces have obviously prepared for. They're taking fire from concealed positions on elevation points that I identified during mission planning. Current approach is resulting in unnecessary casualties with zero probability of successful hostage extraction." There was a pause before Thompson responded. "Webb, are you monitoring this frequency?" "I'm monitoring, and I don't appreciate having my tactical decisions second-guessed by someone who's not even part of this operation." "Sergeant Lawson has more extraction experience than your entire team combined," Thompson replied coldly. "Maybe you should consider listening to her recommendations." With all due respect, major federal jurisdiction means federal command authority. We don't need advice from retired personnel who are not familiar with current FBI protocols. Riley watched through her scope as another FBI agent went down, struck by sniper fire from a position she'd specifically warned them about. The wounded agent's screams carried clearly through the canyon, adding urgency to an operation that was rapidly spiraling out of control. "Razor, this is Viper. Enemy sniper positions are exactly where I predicted. Alpha team is exposed on open ground with no covered withdrawal route. If they don't move in the next 60 seconds, we're going to have multiple KIA." "Webb, did you copy that?" Thompson demanded. "I copied," Webb responded tersely. "Alpha team initiate withdrawal to secondary positions." "We can't move." Agent Chen's voice was strained with pain and fear. "Anyone who breaks cover is getting cut down immediately." Through her night vision, Riley could see the tactical situation with crystal clarity. The FBI agents were trapped in a natural kill zone, pinned down by disciplined enemy fire from positions that offered perfect concealment and overlapping coverage. Without immediate intervention, the entire rescue operation would end in disaster. "Webb, you need to abort this approach and reposition," Riley transmitted directly. "The enemy has you exactly where they want you." "I don't take tactical advice from retired support personnel," Webb snapped back. "We're federal agents conducting a federal operation." Riley felt her jaw clench at the support personnel comment. Even now, with his operation falling apart and his agents in mortal danger, Webb couldn't acknowledge that she might possess relevant expertise. "Bravo team advanced to provide covering fire for Alpha's withdrawal." Webb ordered, apparently determined to solve the problem through brute force rather than tactical adaptation. "Sir, if we advance on that route, we're going to walk into the same trap Alpha did," the Bravo team leader responded. "Those are your orders. Execute immediately." Riley watched in mounting horror as 6 FBI agents began moving along exactly the route she'd warned against during planning. The kidnappers had obviously anticipated this movement because concentrated fire erupted from multiple positions as soon as the agents exposed themselves. "Contact, contact!" screamed the Bravo team leader as his unit scattered for inadequate cover. "We're taking heavy fire from multiple directions." The operation was now a complete disaster. 12 FBI agents were pinned down in 2 separate locations, taking casualties from enemy forces who held all the tactical advantages. Senator Hayes remained in enemy hands, and every minute of continued fighting reduced the chances of extracting her alive. "This is Agent Webb," came the strained transmission. "I'm calling for immediate reinforcement from local SWAT units and requesting military air support." "Webb, you can't call in airstrikes on a hostage situation." Thompson's voice carried both anger and disbelief. "I'm not requesting strikes. I'm requesting reconnaissance and suppressive fire to break enemy contact." Riley keyed her radio with growing urgency. "Razor, if they bring in helicopters without coordinated ground movement, enemy forces will either execute the hostage or use her as a human shield. This needs to be resolved with precision, not overwhelming force." "Agent Webb," Thompson's voice was deadly serious, "I'm strongly recommending you accept tactical consultation from Sergeant Lawson before the situation deteriorates further." "Negative. FBI maintains operational control. We don't need guidance from someone whose military experience doesn't translate to domestic hostage rescue." That final dismissal broke something inside Riley's professional restraint. She'd watched too many good people die because commanders refused to acknowledge expertise that came from unexpected sources. Senator Hayes was depending on professionals to save her life, and those professionals were failing because of institutional pride and gender-based assumptions. "Razor requests permission to intervene," Riley transmitted. There was a long pause before Thompson responded. "Viper, you're not officially part of this operation." "Ma'am, with respect, 12 federal agents are about to die and Senator Hayes will be executed if someone doesn't fix the situation right now." Another pause. Then Thompson's voice came back with resigned determination. "Viper, you have tactical authority to provide emergency assistance to federal agents under fire. Use your discretion." Agent Webb's voice exploded over the radio. "I'm ordering all personnel to maintain current positions and await reinforcement. Any unauthorized movement will result in federal charges." Riley switched off her radio and began moving toward the trapped FBI agents. Webb could threaten her with federal charges later. Right now, she had lives to save and a mission to complete. The same people who'd spent the evening questioning her qualifications were about to discover exactly what 8 years of special operations experience could accomplish when applied with precision and purpose. The retired support personnel was about to show them how real tactical leadership worked. Riley moved through the darkness with the fluid precision of someone who'd spent years perfecting the art of invisible warfare. Her night vision goggles revealed every rock, every tree, every potential cover position as she approached the trapped Alpha team from an angle that the enemy forces hadn't anticipated. The FBI agents were huddled behind a fallen log that provided minimal protection from the sustained automatic weapons fire raking their position. Agent Chen was applying pressure to a wounded teammate's shoulder, while another agent returned sporadic fire at muzzle flashes they couldn't effectively target. "Alpha Team, this is Viper," Riley whispered into her tactical radio using a frequency she knew the kidnappers wouldn't be monitoring. "I'm approaching your 6 o'clock position. Do not fire in my direction." "Who the hell is Viper?" Agent Chen responded, her voice tight with stress and confusion. "The retired support personnel who's about to save your lives," Riley replied dryly. "Stay low and be ready to move on my signal." She reached the log line and slid into position beside Agent Chen, her appearance causing several FBI agents to stare in shock. Here was a woman in full tactical gear, moving with professional competence through a firefight that had trapped 12 federal agents. "How did you get here without taking fire?" Chen asked, impressed, despite the circumstances. "Same way I'm going to get you out," Riley replied quickly, assessing the wounded agent's condition. "Shoulder wound through and through, no arterial damage. He'll live if we move him soon." Through her scope, she identified 3 enemy positions that were maintaining suppressive fire on the trapped agents. The kidnappers were disciplined and well-trained, but they'd made the mistake of establishing a predictable pattern of fire that someone with her experience could exploit. Agent Webb, this is Lawson, she transmitted on the command frequency. I'm with Alpha Team. Request permission to coordinate their extraction. Negative? Webb's response was immediate and furious. You're not authorized to participate in this operation. I'm ordering you to withdraw immediately. Riley ignored him and keyed her radio to speak directly with Major Thompson. Razor, this is Viper. Current tactical situation requires immediate action to prevent multiple casualties. Request authorization to assume tactical command of rescue operation. You don't have the authority to assume command of a federal operation, Webb interjected before Thompson could respond. Agent Webb, Thompson's voice carried the unmistakable tone of a career military officer who'd reached the end of her patience. Your operation has resulted in multiple wounded agents and zero progress toward hostage extraction. I'm recommending you accept assistance from someone who actually knows what they're doing. I don't take recommendations from military personnel who have no jurisdiction in domestic operations. Riley ignored Webb and keyed her radio to address the trapped agents directly. All Alpha Team personnel listen carefully. In 60 seconds, I'm going to suppress the 3 enemy positions that are pinning you down. When I do, you'll have a narrow window to move to better cover. Follow Agent Chen, move fast and stay low. Wait, shouldn't we coordinate this through command? One of the agents protested. Command has been coordinating for the last 30 minutes, Riley replied, checking her equipment. How's that working out for you? Agent Chen looked around at her wounded teammates and made a command decision. We'll follow your lead. Riley positioned herself at the edge of the log line and began identifying targets through her scope. The enemy positions were well concealed, but they'd been firing from the same locations long enough for her to track their muzzle flashes and movement patterns. Razor, this is Viper, beginning tactical intervention in 30 seconds. Viper, you're not authorized, Webb began. Webb, shut up, Thompson interrupted. Viper, you have my authorization. Execute your plan. Riley didn't wait for further discussion. She'd identified the enemy sniper who was causing the most problems for the trapped agents, a skilled marksman, positioned in a rocky outcropping that provided excellent concealment in field of fire. Her first shot took him out cleanly, disrupting the coordinated fire pattern that had kept the FBI agents pinned down. Immediately, she shifted to the second position, where an automatic weapons team was providing suppressive fire. 2 quick shots neutralized both gunners before they could adjust to the new threat. Alpha Team, move now, she ordered. Agent Chen led her team in a disciplined withdrawal to a more defensible position, carrying their wounded teammate while Riley provided covering fire that kept the remaining enemy forces from interfering with their movement. How the hell did you do that? Chen gasped as they reached safety behind a granite boulder formation that offered superior protection. Training and experience, Riley replied, already scanning for the next tactical opportunity. Something your command structure apparently doesn't value. Over the radio, she could hear Webb's voice becoming increasingly shrill as he tried to regain control of an operation that had moved beyond his ability to manage. All units maintain current positions and await my orders. Any agent who moves without authorization will face disciplinary action. Agent Chen looked at Riley with a mixture of respect and disbelief. Are you really going to ignore direct orders from the operation commander? I'm going to save Senator Hayes and get your people home alive. If Webb wants to court-martial me afterward, he's welcome to treat. She switched to the frequency monitoring Bravo team, who were still trapped in their own untenable position. Bravo team, this is Viper. Report your status. We've got 2 wounded and are taking sustained fire from at least 4 positions. We can't move without taking casualties. Understood. Stand by for tactical support. Through her scope, Riley could see the building where Senator Hayes was being held. The kidnappers had positioned their defensive forces to protect against conventional assault approaches, but they hadn't anticipated someone with her combination of reconnaissance skills and tactical expertise. Razor, this is Viper. I can reach the target building, but I need someone to coordinate extraction once I locate the hostage. Webb is the operation commander, Thompson replied carefully. Webb's operation has failed. He's got 12 agents pinned down and no plan for reaching the objective. I need someone who can make command decisions based on tactical reality, not bureaucratic protocol. There was a pause before Thompson responded. Viper, you have tactical authority to execute hostage extraction. I'll coordinate support elements. Negative, Webb's voice erupted over the radio. I'm the senior federal agent on scene. No one moves without my authorization. Riley keyed her radio with growing impatience. Webb, while you've been arguing about authority, the kidnappers have had 30 minutes to fortify their positions and potentially harm the hostage. Every minute we delay increases the risk to Senator Hayes. I don't need tactical lectures from someone who's been out of the military for 6 months. Agent Chen, who'd been listening to the radio exchanges while treating her wounded teammate, looked at Riley with new understanding. You're really not retired support personnel, are you? I'm exactly what this situation requires, someone who puts mission success ahead of ego. She began moving through the darkness toward the building where Senator Hayes was being held, leaving behind the chaos of competing command structures and wounded federal agents. The woman who'd been dismissed as a diversity hire at her own wedding reception was about to demonstrate exactly what 8 years of special operations experience could accomplish when applied with precision and purpose. While others argued about who had the right to lead, she was simply going to get the job done. Senator Hayes was counting on her even if she didn't know it yet. And Riley had never failed a mission when American lives hung in the balance. The real extraction operation was about to begin. As Riley approached the perimeter of the kidnappers' compound, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the staging area where FBI and military personnel were still arguing about jurisdiction and tactical authority. From it emerged a tall man in his late 60s, his silver hair close-cropped in military fashion, his bearing unmistakably that of someone accustomed to command. Charles Warner, Deputy National Security Advisor and former Special Forces Colonel, surveyed the chaotic scene with evident displeasure. His cold blue eyes quickly found Major Thompson amidst the crowd of federal agents and military liaisons. "What's the situation, Major?" he asked, his voice carrying the gravelly texture of someone who'd spent decades giving orders that were never questioned. Thompson briefed him quickly on the failed FBI assault and Riley's current position. Lawson, Warner's eyebrows rose slightly. "James Lawson's daughter, I didn't realize she was operational." "She's not, sir. Officially, she's a civilian, but she was the only qualified operator with intimate knowledge of this terrain." Warner nodded thoughtfully. "I served with her father in Desert Storm. If she's half the soldier he was, those kidnappers are in for a surprise." He paused, his expression hardening. "What's Webb's status?" "Still insisting on maintaining command authority despite the tactical situation." "Not anymore," Warner said firmly, striding toward the FBI command post, where Webb was frantically trying to coordinate reinforcements that wouldn't arrive in time. "Agent Webb," Warner's authoritative voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "I'm Charles Warner, Deputy National Security Advisor. By presidential authority, I'm assuming command of this operation." Webb looked up, his face flushed with stress and anger. "With all due respect, sir, this is an FBI operation on domestic soil. The military has no jurisdiction here." "This isn't a military operation," Warner replied coldly. "This is a national security emergency involving a chairperson of the Senate Intelligence Committee who has access to classified information that could compromise ongoing operations worldwide. The president has authorized me to coordinate all assets necessary to secure Senator Hayes' safe return." He turned to Thompson. "Major, what's Lawson's current position?" "Approaching the target building from the eastern ridge, sir. She's bypassed enemy defensive positions and should be in position for direct intervention within 5 minutes." "Good. Coordinate medical evacuation and extraction support. I want helicopters on standby, but out of audible range until called." As Warner took control of the operation with the efficient precision of someone who'd managed similar crises for decades, Riley was making her final approach to the target building. The structure was a converted hunting lodge nestled against the canyon wall, its rustic exterior concealing what intelligence suggested was a fortified safe house used by international operatives. Through her night vision scope, she counted 6 external guards maintaining disciplined watch patterns around the perimeter. These weren't amateur kidnappers or opportunistic criminals. Their movement patterns and equipment suggested military or paramilitary training, the same professional competence that had allowed them to snatch a United States senator from a heavily secured hotel in broad daylight. "Razor, this is Viper," she whispered into her tactical radio. "I have eyes on the objective. counting 6 external security professional-grade equipment and tactics. Recommend we treat this as a state-sponsored operation. Copy that, Viper. Intel suggests the same cell responsible for the Prague embassy attack. Expect sophisticated countermeasures and willingness to execute hostage if cornered. The mention of Prague sent a chill down Riley's spine. 1 year ago, she'd led a team tasked with extracting an intelligence asset from the American embassy during what was supposed to be a routine operation. It had turned into a bloodbath when unknown forces with insider knowledge ambushed them. 3 of her team members had died that day, including her closest friend in the unit. She pushed the memory aside, focusing on the present mission. The building's thermal signature showed multiple individuals inside with one heat signature separated from the others, likely Senator Hayes being held in isolation. As Riley prepared to neutralize the first perimeter guard, her radio crackled with an unexpected voice. "Viper, this is Watchman. Do you copy?" She froze, recognizing the call sign of Charles Warner, her father's former commanding officer and one of the most respected figures in the intelligence community. "Copy, Watchman. Unexpected to hear from you on this channel. Situation has escalated. Senator Hayes isn't just any hostage. She has direct knowledge of Operation Undertow." Riley's blood ran cold. Operation Undertow was a classified designation she'd heard mentioned only in hushed tones during her highest-level briefings. A Cold War relic that supposedly continued under deep cover, involving American assets embedded in sensitive positions worldwide. "Understand, sir. How does this affect extraction parameters?" "Hayes must be recovered alive and with minimum public exposure. But there's more. The kidnapping team leader has been identified as Viktor Orlov." Riley nearly dropped her radio. Viktor Orlov was the ghost that had haunted her nightmares since Prague. Former Russian Spetsnaz, then FSB, before going private. He was the suspected mastermind behind the embassy attack that had killed her teammates. "Sir, Orlov was responsible for Prague. This is personal for me." "I know." Warner's voice carried unexpected sympathy. "That's why I need to tell you something. Prague wasn't what you think it was. Hayes was the civilian oversight for that operation. She made the call that compromised your team." Riley felt as if she'd been physically struck. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying be careful who you trust, including Hayes. Your primary mission is still extraction, but be aware that she may attempt to destroy evidence she's carrying. A small data device containing classified information about Undertow." "How do you know this, sir?" "Because your father and I were part of the original Undertow operation during the final days of the Cold War. Many agents were sacrificed when the mission parameters changed. That's why your father left the service. He couldn't accept that kind of collateral damage." Riley's mind raced, processing this new information while maintaining tactical awareness of her surroundings. If Warner was right, Senator Hayes wasn't just a victim, she was potentially complicit in the deaths of Riley's teammates. "Viper, do you copy?" "I copy, sir. Mission parameters unchanged. Extract Hayes, secure any classified materials." "Good. One more thing. There's a strong possibility of a mole in the FBI operation." Information about the rescue attempt reached Orlov too quickly. Riley thought back to the too-perfect ambush of the FBI teams. "Any suspects?" "We're investigating. Trust no one outside this channel. Watchman out." As the communication ended, Riley refocused on the immediate tactical situation. The revelation about Hayes and Prague complicated her emotional landscape, but her professional training remained paramount. The mission came first. Personal feelings and potential vengeance would have to wait. She moved silently toward the first perimeter guard, a disciplined professional who was maintaining his patrol pattern with military precision. Under different circumstances, she might have respected his professionalism. Tonight, he was an obstacle between her and her objective. The neutralization was quick and silent. A precise strike to the carotid artery, followed by controlled descent to the ground. No alarm raised, no warning given to his companions. 1 down, 5 to go. Riley worked her way methodically around the perimeter, eliminating guards with the silent efficiency that had earned her the call, signed Viper, during her first deployment. Each takedown was executed with precision, leaving no trace and raising no alarm. As she approached the final external guard, her instincts flared. This one was different, more alert, more experienced. He sensed something wrong before she could reach him, turning suddenly with his weapon raised. Riley had no choice. She fired once, her suppressed weapon making only a soft cough in the night. The guard dropped, but not before his radio crackled with a partial alert. Inside the lodge, she could hear sudden movement. Her element of surprise was compromised. The extraction had just become significantly more complex. Razor, this is Viper, cover blown. Moving to direct assault. Request immediate support at my location. Copy, Viper. Support elements moving to your position. ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes might as well be 4 hours in a hostage situation. Riley knew she had to act immediately before Orloff could execute Senator Hayes. She approached the building's rear entrance, preparing for dynamic entry, the most dangerous moment of any hostage rescue. As she positioned herself, she heard a familiar voice from inside. The American intelligence apparatus has interfered in sovereign operations for the last time, a man declared in accented English. This individual will pay the price for her government's criminal activities. Orloff, he was preparing for an execution. Riley had no more time for careful planning. She breached the door with explosive precision, entering the building in a textbook combat role that brought her into position behind a heavy wooden table. Gunfire erupted around her. 3 armed men reacted to her entrance, their weapons tracking toward her position. Riley eliminated them with methodical precision. 3 shots, 3 targets neutralized. Impressive, came a voice from the adjacent room. I expected the famous Viper would eventually find us, but I didn't expect you to come alone. Riley moved carefully toward the voice, maintaining cover as she advanced. Through the partially open door, she could see Senator Hayes bound to a chair, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. Behind her stood Victor Orloff, his pistol pressed against the senator's head. Drop your weapon and step away from the hostage, Riley commanded, her rifle trained on Orloff's position. The man smiled coldly. The soldier from Prague. How fitting that you should be here for this moment. Did they tell you why your friends died that day? This isn't about Prague. This is about you releasing the senator now. It's all about Prague, Orloff countered. Ask the senator. Ask her about Operation Undertow and the agents who were sacrificed when they became inconvenient. Riley saw Hayes flinch at the mention of Undertow. Warner had been right. I don't know what you're talking about, Hayes said, her voice steady despite her situation. No. Orloff pulled a small device from his pocket. Then why were you carrying this, the complete list of American deep cover operatives worldwide? The continuation of a Cold War operation that should have ended decades ago. Riley kept her weapon trained on Orloff while processing this information. If he was telling the truth, Hayes had been carrying intelligence that could compromise hundreds of American agents. It doesn't matter, Riley said firmly. You're going to release the senator and surrender, or you're not leaving this room alive. Orloff laughed, a harsh sound without humor. You Americans, always so certain of your moral superiority. Did you know that your Senator Hayes personally authorized the intelligence leak that led to your team's ambush in Prague? 3 of your comrades died because she needed to protect Undertow's secrets. Riley felt a cold rage building inside her, but maintained her professional demeanor. Last chance, Orloff. Release the senator. Or what? You'll shoot me. Kill the man who can tell you the truth about who really betrayed your friends. At that moment, Riley noticed Senator Hayes making a subtle movement with her bound hands. She was attempting to reach something concealed in her clothing, possibly a backup data device containing the intelligence Orloff had mentioned. The tactical situation had just become exponentially more complex. If Hayes was indeed carrying classified intelligence and attempting to destroy it, Riley had multiple conflicting objectives: save the hostage, neutralize Orloff, and secure potentially vital national security information. Your government used you, Sergeant Lawson, Orloff continued, just as they used me and countless others. We're all ghosts in their protocol, expendable assets to be activated and eliminated as needed. That's enough, Orloff. Hayes spoke up, her voice surprisingly commanding despite her situation. Sergeant, this man is a terrorist attempting to acquire classified information. Your mission is to neutralize him and secure me safely. Riley kept her weapon steady, her mind racing through options. Senator, are you carrying classified materials that could compromise American operatives? Hayes's expression hardened. That's not relevant to your current mission, Sergeant. It is as if you were involved in the Prague operation that got my teammates killed. A flash of something guilt-fear calculation crossed Hayes's face. This is not the time or place for that discussion. Your duty is clear. In that moment, Riley understood that she was caught between multiple layers of deception. Orloff, despite being an enemy operative, might be telling the truth about Hayes and Operation Undertow. Hayes, despite being an American senator, might have sacrificed American operatives to protect classified secrets. "Drop your weapon," came a new voice from behind Riley. She didn't need to turn to recognize Thompson's voice. Major Thompson had entered the building through another entrance, her weapon raised. "Major," Riley acknowledged without taking her eyes off Orloff and Hayes. "Situation is complex. The senator may be carrying classified intelligence that compromises American operatives worldwide." "I'm aware," Thompson replied, her voice unnaturally flat. "That's why I need you to drop your weapon now, Riley." Something in Thompson's tone sent warning signals through Riley's combat-trained senses. She risked a quick glance back and saw Thompson's weapon aimed not at Orloff, but at her. "You're the mole," Riley realized aloud. "You've been working with Orloff." Thompson's expression remained professional, but her eyes carried a hint of regret. "It's more complicated than that. Operation Undertow was supposed to end with the Cold War. Instead, it evolved into something darker. American agents conducting unsanctioned operations worldwide, answering to a shadow authority that exists outside normal command channels. And you decided to expose it by kidnapping a United States senator." Riley kept her weapon trained on Orloff while maintaining awareness of Thompson's position. "Hayes isn't just overseeing Undertow, she's directing it," Thompson explained. "Using American operatives for political operations that have nothing to do with national security. Prague was one of them. Your team wasn't supposed to extract an asset, you were sent to eliminate a political problem for Hayes's corporate donors." Riley felt as if the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew about her military service, about the operations she'd participated in, was being called into question. "That's a lie," Hayes insisted. "Thompson is a traitor working with Russian intelligence." "Then why are you carrying the Undertow files on your person?" Thompson challenged. "Files that were supposed to have been destroyed years ago by congressional order." The tension in the room was palpable, a complex web of loyalties and betrayals that transcended simple concepts of ally and enemy. Riley found herself in an impossible position, caught between multiple versions of the truth with lives hanging in the balance. At that moment, Riley's tactical radio crackled to life. "Viper, this is Watchman. We have confirmation that Thompson is compromised. Do not trust her. Repeat, Thompson is working with Orloff. Neutralize both and extract Hayes immediately." Warner's voice added yet another layer to the already complex situation. If Thompson was compromised, why was she exposing Hayes's apparently illegal operation? If Hayes was running an unsanctioned intelligence program, why was Warner protecting her? The answer came in a sudden realization that sent ice through Riley's veins. Warner wasn't trying to stop the exposure of Operation Undertow. He was trying to control it. As one of the original architects of the program during the Cold War, he had as much to lose from its public exposure as Hayes did. This wasn't about national security anymore. This was about powerful people protecting themselves from accountability for decades of potentially illegal operations conducted under the guise of patriotism. "Everyone needs to lower their weapons," Riley said firmly, making a decision that would change the course of her life forever. "This ends now." "You don't understand what's at stake," Hayes argued. "Those files contain the names of hundreds of American operatives. If they're exposed, if they're operatives in an illegal program, then perhaps they should be exposed," Riley countered. "How many more teams like mine will be sacrificed to protect your secrets?" Orloff laughed softly. "Finally, the American soldier begins to see the truth. Your own government is often your worst enemy." "You're no better," Riley told him. "Using this information to settle personal vendettas doesn't make you righteous." The standoff had reached its critical point. 4 people in a room, each with their own agenda, each believing they were fighting for the right cause. And Riley, caught in the middle, had to make a decision that would determine not just the outcome of this mission, but potentially the fate of an entire clandestine program that had operated in the shadows for decades. As Riley prepared to act, the building suddenly shook with the impact of an explosion outside. The FBI reinforcements had arrived, but their tactical approach was as heavy-handed as Webb's initial assault. The distraction was all Orloff needed. He grabbed Hayes and began dragging her toward a rear exit, using her as a human shield. "Stay back," he shouted, his pistol pressed against Hayes's temple. Thompson immediately shifted her aim toward Orloff, momentarily taking her attention off Riley. It was the opening Riley needed. With practiced precision, she fired a single round that struck Thompson's shoulder, neutralizing the immediate threat without killing her former commander. Then in one fluid motion, Riley pivoted and launched herself toward Orloff and Hayes. The maneuver was risky, placing herself between the hostage and the kidnapper, but it was executed with the perfect timing that came from years of high-stakes operations. Orloff's weapon discharged the bullet, grazing Riley's tactical vest as she collided with him, driving both her shoulder and her combat knife into his midsection. They crashed to the floor, Hayes tumbling free from his grasp. The fight was brutal and brief. Orloff was a trained killer with decades of experience, but Riley had youth training and the righteous fury of someone who had finally discovered the truth about her teammates' deaths. Her strikes were precise and devastating, targeting the vulnerabilities of the human body with scientific precision. Within seconds, Orloff lay unconscious, blood seeping from multiple non-lethal wounds. Riley secured him with zip ties before turning her attention to Hayes, who was scrambling to retrieve something from inside her jacket. "That's enough, Senator," Riley said, her voice deadly calm as she trained her weapon on the older woman. "Hand over the device." Hayes froze, her expression a mixture of indignation and fear. "You don't understand what you're doing, Sergeant. That information is classified at the highest levels." "I understand perfectly. You're carrying evidence of an illegal operation that got my friends killed. Hand it over, now." For a moment it seemed Hayes might refuse. Then slowly she withdrew a small data device from an inner pocket and held it out. As Riley took the device, she heard multiple footsteps approaching FBI agents, finally breaching the building after the external explosion. "What happens now?" Hayes asked, her politician's composure beginning to reassert itself. "You do realize the implications of what you've done, the careers that will be destroyed if that information becomes public." Riley looked at the woman who had once been one of the most powerful figures in the American intelligence community, now revealed as someone willing to sacrifice loyal operatives to protect her own interests. "What happens now is justice," Riley replied. "For my teammates, for all the operatives used as pawns in your private war, and for the American people who deserve to know what's being done in their name." The door burst open and FBI agents flooded into the room, weapons raised. Agent Chen was among them, her expression changing from tactical focus to shock as she took in the scene: Thompson wounded and restrained, Orloff unconscious and bound, Senator Hayes standing free but clearly under Riley's control. "Federal agents, and everyone freeze!" shouted the lead agent. Riley slowly raised her hands, keeping the data device visible. "Agent Chen, secure this evidence. It contains classified information related to an illegal operation called Undertow." Senator Hayes and Major Thompson were both involved. Charles Warner, the Deputy National Security Advisor, is also complicit. Chen looked uncertain, caught between standard protocol and the extraordinary situation unfolding before her. "That's an outrageous accusation." Hayes began, her political instincts kicking in. "This woman is clearly unstable." "Save it, Senator," Chen interrupted, making her decision. She approached Riley and carefully took the device. "I saw how she operated tonight. She saved 12 federal agents while our command structure failed. If she says there's something on this device worth protecting, I believe her." As more agents secured the scene, Riley felt the adrenaline that had sustained her beginning to fade. The events of the past few hours crashed over her, leaving her wetting the firefight with the kidnappers, the revelations about Prague and Operation Undertow, the final confrontation with Orloff. Through the window, she could see Charles Warner arriving at the scene, his face a mask of controlled concern as he directed FBI personnel. He hadn't spotted her yet, didn't know that she had secured the Undertow files, and understood his role in the decades-long deception. Riley knew that the real battle was just beginning. The truth about Operation Undertow would threaten powerful people across multiple agencies and congressional committees. They would use every resource at their disposal to discredit her, silence her, or worse. But for the first time since Prague, Riley felt a sense of clarity about her purpose. This wasn't just about avenging her fallen teammates anymore. This was about exposing a system that treated loyal operatives as expendable assets, that conducted unsanctioned operations under the guise of national security, that betrayed the very principles it claimed to defend. As the FBI began processing the scene, Riley touched the wedding ring still on her finger. She thought about Nathan, about the life they had planned together, about the civilian peace she had hoped to find. That dream seemed very distant, now possibly lost forever. But in its place was something else, a mission more important than any she had undertaken before. The Ghost Protocol that had used and discarded operatives like her for decades was about to be exposed to the light. The real battle for truth was about to begin, and Riley Lawson was just getting started. The FBI staging area was illuminated by harsh floodlights, creating sharp shadows across the faces of agents and military personnel, processing the aftermath of what would later be classified as one of the most complex counterterrorism operations in recent history. Medical teams attended to wounded agents, while intelligence officers debriefed those involved in the firefight. Riley sat on the tailgate of an ambulance, allowing a medic to clean and dress the wound where Orlov's bullet had grazed her shoulder. She had refused to be evacuated with the other injured personnel, insisting on remaining at the scene until the situation was fully resolved. Charles Warner, Deputy National Security Advisor, stood in the center of the operation, issuing directives to federal agents with the authoritative bearing of someone accustomed to command. To anyone watching, he appeared to be exactly what his position suggested: a senior government official managing a crisis with professional competence. Only Riley knew the truth. Warner was one of the architects of Operation Undertow, the decades-long shadow program that had operated outside official channels, sacrificing loyal agents when politically expedient. Ms. Lawson, Warner approached her, his voice carrying just the right note of respectful concern. I want to personally thank you for your extraordinary service tonight. The president will be briefed on your actions. Riley met his gaze steadily, searching for any sign that he knew she possessed the Undertow files. His eyes revealed nothing but practiced professionalism. Just doing my job, sir. A job you officially left 6 months ago, Warner observed with a tight smile. Remarkable timing that you happened to be available for this particular extraction. I was at my wedding reception, Riley replied flatly. Major Thompson found me there. Warner's expression shifted slightly at the mention of Thompson, who was currently being treated for the shoulder wound Riley had inflicted before being taken into federal custody. Yes, Thompson, a regrettable situation. We had no indication she was compromised. Compromise is an interesting word choice, Riley said carefully. It implies she betrayed something legitimate. Warner's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Operation Undertow is a classified national security program, Sergeant Lawson, not something to be discussed in an unsecured location. So he knew. Riley maintained her neutral expression, though her heart rate accelerated slightly. Warner was testing to see how much she knew and what she might have already shared with others. Senator Hayes is asking to speak with you. Warner continued, changing the subject smoothly. She's quite impressed with your tactical performance tonight. I'll bet she is, Riley replied. Where is she now? Secure medical evaluation, standard protocol for recovered hostages. Warner gestured toward a black SUV with tinted windows parked at the edge of the staging area. She's scheduled for transport to a secured facility within the hour. Riley understood the implied threat. Once Hayes was moved to a secured facility, any evidence or testimony she might provide about Undertow would disappear into the classified machinery of government secrecy. I should probably check on her, Riley said, rising from the ambulance tailgate. After all, extracting her safely was my mission. Your mission is complete, Ms. Lawson, Warner replied, a harder edge entering his voice. You've done exceptional work tonight, but you're a civilian now. The rest is for official channels. Before Riley could respond, Agent Sarah Chen approached her FBI tactical gear, splattered with mud and blood from the earlier firefight. Ms. Lawson, Chen said formally, though her eyes conveyed a deeper respect. We need your statement for the official record. Warner frowned slightly at the interruption. Agent Chen, Ms. Lawson has been through enough tonight. Her debriefing can wait until tomorrow. Actually, sir, Chen replied with practiced deference that didn't quite mask her determination. FBI protocol requires immediate debriefing of all operational personnel following a hostage recovery, even civilian consultants. Riley suppressed a smile. Chen was creating an opportunity for them to speak privately away from Warner's watchful eye. Of course, Riley nodded. I'm happy to provide my statement now. Warner's displeasure was evident but challenging. Established FBI protocols would draw unwanted attention. Very well, I'll expect a full report by morning, Agent Chen. As Warner walked away to continue managing the operation, Chen led Riley toward a mobile command center set up at the edge of the staging area. That man gives me the creeps, Chen muttered once they were out of earshot. Something about him feels off. Trust that instinct, Riley replied quietly. Did you secure the device? Chen nodded subtly. Handed it directly to our technical specialist. She's examining it now off-network. If there's anything on it, we'll find it. There's a risk in that, Riley warned. Warner has connections throughout the federal government. If word gets back to him before we have protection in place. Already handled, Chen assured her. My team has been through enough tonight to know who to trust. And it's not the suits who threw us into a tactical nightmare without proper intelligence. Riley studied the FBI agent with new appreciation. Chen had demonstrated not only physical courage during the firefight, but moral courage in the aftermath, willing to pursue the truth even when it might implicate powerful figures. Warner will try to isolate Hayes, Riley said. Once she's in a secured government facility, any testimony about Undertow will be classified at the highest levels. Then we need to reach her before that happens, Chen replied. My supervisor is still processing the scene. I can get you access to Hayes for a preliminary statement while Warner is occupied. Riley nodded. Let's move quickly. As they crossed the staging area toward the medical tent where Hayes was being held, Riley caught sight of a familiar figure approaching from the perimeter checkpoint. Colonel James Lawson strode through the chaos with the purposeful bearing of someone who had navigated war zones for decades, his civilian clothes unable to disguise his military bearing. Dad, Riley called out surprised. How did you get here? Colonel Lawson reached his daughter, his weathered face a mixture of concern and pride. Did you really think I'd stay at the reception while my daughter was in combat? I've been monitoring the situation since you left. The FBI has this place locked down, Riley said. How did you get through the perimeter? A slight smile crossed her father's face. I may be retired, but I still know a few people, including Charles Warner's secretary, who was kind enough to authorize my access when I explained I was checking on my daughter. Riley's eyes widened slightly. You know Warner. We served together in Desert Storm, Colonel Lawson confirmed, and in several operations that don't appear in any official record. His expression hardened, including the early days of Undertow. Chen looked between father and daughter, sensing the significance of the conversation. I'll give you two a moment. Meet me at the medical tent in 5 minutes, Lawson. As Chen departed, Riley lowered her voice. Dad, what do you know about Undertow? Colonel Lawson glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard. Enough to know it should have been terminated 30 years ago. It began as a legitimate Cold War operation, deep cover assets embedded in sensitive positions worldwide. But after the Soviet collapse, instead of dismantling the network, certain elements within our government repurposed it for operations outside congressional oversight. Warner was involved. Warner helped design the program, Colonel Lawson confirmed, but he wasn't alone. There's an entire shadow infrastructure that's been operating for decades using patriotism as cover for actions that serve private and political interests. Riley processed this information quickly. That's why you left the service. Her father nodded, regret evident in his eyes. I couldn't be part of a system that betrayed the very principles I swore to defend. That's why I trained you the way I did, not just to be a soldier, but to understand that true loyalty is to the Constitution and the American people, not to any individual or agency. Riley touched the pocket where she had secured a duplicate of the data device she'd taken from Hayes. She'd made the copy before surrendering the original to Chen, a precautionary measure born from years of operating in environments where trust was a luxury. Hayes was carrying the complete Undertow files, she told her father. Names, operations, everything. Orloff wanted them exposed. Thompson was trying to stop him, but for different reasons than Warner. She believed the program had become corrupt. And you, Riley met her father's gaze. I believe the truth needs to come out, but in a way that protects the innocent agents who were just following orders. Colonel Lawson studied his daughter with evident pride. You've become the soldier I always hoped you'd be. One who can tell the difference between an order and the right thing to do. I need to speak with Hayes before Warner moves her to a secured facility, Riley said. Will you watch our backs? Always, her father promised. But be careful. Warner didn't reach his position by being careless. If he suspects you have evidence about Undertow, he'll do whatever it takes to neutralize the threat. Riley nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She was no longer just a soldier executing a mission. She was now a potential whistleblower, threatening a covert program protected by some of the most powerful figures in the American government. "I'll meet you at the extraction point in 20 minutes," she told her father. "If I'm not there, you will be," Colonel Lawson interrupted firmly. "But I'll be ready either way." The medical tent was quieter than the bustling staging area outside, with partitioned sections creating private spaces for treating the wounded. Agent Chen led Riley to a cordoned area at the rear, where Senator Rebecca Hayes sat on the edge of a medical cot, her wrists bandaged where the restraints had cut into her skin during the kidnapping. Despite her ordeal, Hayes maintained the composed dignity of someone accustomed to power. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her eyes, sharp and calculating, assessed Riley as she entered. "Senator Hayes," Riley said formally, "I'm here to take your preliminary statement about the events tonight." Hayes glanced at Chen, then back to Riley. "Of course, though I believe I've already provided the essential details to Deputy Advisor Warner. This is for the FBI's separate investigation," Chen explained, positioning herself near the entrance to the partitioned area. "Standard procedure in kidnapping cases." Hayes nodded, though her expression suggested she understood more than she acknowledged. "Very well. What would you like to know, Sergeant Lawson?" Riley pulled up a folding chair and sat across from Hayes, close enough to speak privately, but maintaining a professional distance. "Let's start with Prague," she said quietly. Hayes's composure faltered for just a moment, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible tension in her shoulders before she regained control. "I'm not sure what an incident in Prague has to do with tonight's events," Hayes replied carefully. "1 year ago, 3 American operatives died during what was supposed to be a routine extraction." Riley continued, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to surface. "They died because someone leaked their operational details to the same group that kidnapped you tonight." Hayes maintained her neutral expression. "Operational security breaches are unfortunately common in high-risk environments. Without specific evidence—" "I have the evidence," Riley interrupted. "The complete undertow files you were carrying, including the authorization for the Prague operation signed by you." This time, Hayes couldn't hide her reaction. Her face paled slightly, and her hands tensed on the edge of the medical cot. "Those files are classified at the highest level," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Possessing them is a federal offense. So is operating a covert program without congressional oversight," Riley countered. "So is sacrificing American operatives to protect political interests." Hayes studied Riley with new intensity, reassessing the woman she had previously viewed as merely a tactical asset. "You don't understand the complexities involved," Hayes said finally. "Undertow was necessary, is necessary. In a world of evolving threats, we need capabilities that exist outside traditional channels. Even if those capabilities include betraying your own people." Riley leaned forward, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Those were my teammates who died in Prague. Good people who believed they were serving their country." Hayes's expression softened slightly, though whether from genuine remorse or political calculation was impossible to determine. "War requires sacrifices," she said quietly. "Sometimes individuals must be sacrificed for the greater good." "That's not your decision to make," Riley replied firmly. "Not outside proper oversight, not without accountability." For a long moment, Hayes was silent, weighing her options with the calculated precision of someone who had navigated political crises for decades. "What do you want, Sergeant Lawson?" she asked finally. "The truth," Riley answered simply. "A public accounting of undertow protection for the agents who served honorably, and accountability for those who corrupted the program for personal or political gain." Hayes laughed softly, though there was no humor in the sound. "Public accounting. Do you have any idea what that would do to national security, to America's standing in the world? The chaos it would cause." "I'm not talking about dumping classified files on the internet," Riley clarified. "I'm talking about proper congressional oversight with protections for sources and methods, transparency where it matters with the right safeguards. And if I refuse to cooperate, then the files go to multiple secure locations with instructions for release if anything happens to me or my family." It was a bluff, but one Riley delivered with the conviction of absolute certainty. Agent Chen shifted slightly at the entrance, a subtle signal that their time was running short. Riley stood maintaining eye contact with Hayes. "You have a choice, Senator. You can be part of fixing this, or you can go down with it. Either way, Undertow's days of operating in the shadows are over." Hayes seemed to age before Riley's eyes, the weight of decades of secrets suddenly visible in the lines of her face. "Warner won't let this happen," she said quietly. "He has contingencies for everything." "Not for me," Riley replied with quiet confidence. "I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. I wasn't part of anyone's plan." As if summoned by his name, Warner's voice carried from outside the medical tent. "Senator Hayes, we're ready for transport." Riley glanced at Chen, who nodded subtly. "Time to go," the FBI agent whispered. "Think about what I said," Riley told Hayes before turning to leave through the rear of the partitioned area. "Your legacy isn't written yet." As Riley slipped away with Chen's assistance, she heard Warner enter the medical area, his voice carrying the practiced concern of the seasoned political operator. "Senator, are you all right? We need to move you to a secure location immediately." Hayes's response was too quiet to hear, but Riley had seen something in the senator's eyes in their final moments together, a flicker of doubt, perhaps even conscience, that suggested the powerful woman might be reconsidering her role in the decades-long deception. Outside the medical tent, Riley rejoined her father, who was maintaining a vigilant watch over the staging area from a position near the perimeter. "Did you get what you needed?" Colonel Lawson asked quietly. "Maybe," Riley replied. "Hayes is rattled, but I don't know if she'll break from Warner's influence." "She doesn't need to," her father said. "Not if we have the files." Agent Chen approached them, her expression serious. "Warner's moving faster than expected. They're loading Hayes into a transport helicopter now. Once she's in a secured government facility, we lose any chance of getting her testimony." Riley watched as Warner escorted Hayes toward a waiting Black Hawk helicopter surrounded by security personnel wearing the distinctive earpieces of Secret Service agents. "This isn't just about Hayes anymore," Riley said. "The undertow files are enough to trigger an investigation if they reach the right people." "And who might those right people be?" a new voice inquired. Riley turned to find Captain Michael Bennett standing nearby, his dress uniform from the wedding now rumpled and stained from the evening's events. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by a subdued curiosity. "Captain Bennett," Riley acknowledged, her voice cooling. "I'm surprised to see you here. This is a secured federal operation." Bennett had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I followed the radio chatter after you left the reception. Called in some favors to get through the perimeter." He hesitated, then continued with unexpected sincerity. "I wanted to see if you needed backup." Riley studied him skeptically. "The same backup you offered when you were telling everyone at my wedding reception that I was unqualified for real military operations." Bennett winced. "I deserve that. I was wrong, Lawson. Wrong about you, wrong about a lot of things." "How much did you hear?" Colonel Lawson asked, his tone making it clear that his trust would not be easily earned. "Enough to know that something called undertow has compromised people at the highest levels," Bennett replied. "Enough to know that Sergeant Lawson extracted a United States senator while 12 FBI agents were pinned down by enemy fire. Enough to know that I've been an arrogant ass who judged a superior soldier based on prejudice rather than performance." Riley exchanged a glance with her father, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Whatever his faults, Bennett was a decorated Marine officer with a reputation for integrity despite his blind spots regarding female operators. "We need to get these files to someone with the authority and independence to act on them," Riley explained, indicating the data device she had copied. "Someone who can't be controlled by Warner or his allies." "I might know someone," Bennett offered. "My former commanding officer is now the Inspector General for the Department of Defense. Career military, absolute integrity, reports directly to Congress on matters involving military misconduct." Riley considered the suggestion. The Department of Defense Inspector General would have both the authority and the independence to investigate allegations of a rogue intelligence operation, even one involving senior officials. "Can you reach him securely?" she asked. Bennett nodded. "I have his personal number. He'll take my call anytime, day or night." "Make the call," Riley decided. "But not from here. We need to move off-site before Warner realizes what's happening." As if on cue, Warner emerged from the medical tent, his expression darkening as he scanned the staging area. When his gaze locked onto Riley and her small group near the perimeter, his posture shifted subtly, the change imperceptible to anyone who hadn't spent years reading human behavior in combat situations. "He knows," Riley said quietly. "Time to go." Colonel Lawson led them toward a nondescript SUV parked just beyond the perimeter checkpoint. "I've got transportation ready. Bennett, you ride with us. Chen, can you create a diversion to buy us some time?" Agent Chen nodded with grim determination. Consider it done. I'll meet you at the rendezvous point in 1 hour. As Chen moved toward the command center with purposeful strides, Riley saw Warner speaking urgently into his phone while gesturing in their direction. Whatever window of opportunity they had was closing rapidly. Move, Riley urged as they reached the SUV. Warner's calling in resources. They climbed into the vehicle, Colonel Lawson taking the wheel with the same calm efficiency he brought to all operations. As they pulled away from the staging area, Riley glanced back to see Warner directing several of the Secret Service agents toward vehicles, his face set in lines of cold determination. "We've got company coming," she warned. "Multiple vehicles, likely federal agents under Warner's direction." Bennett looked genuinely shocked. "The Deputy National Security Advisor is deploying federal agents against an American military officer. This is insane." "Welcome to the real war, Captain," Colonel Lawson said grimly as he accelerated onto the main road. "The one that doesn't make it into the recruiting videos." Riley checked her weapon, a standard-issue sidearm she'd retained from the operation, and assessed their tactical situation. They were outmanned and outgunned if Warner had indeed mobilized federal resources against them. Their only advantage was the element of surprise in the fact that Warner would want to handle the situation quietly without attracting public attention. "Bennett, make that call," she instructed. "We need protection in place before Warner's people catch up to us." As Bennett used his secure phone to contact the Inspector General, Riley turned to her father. "We need to assume all standard extraction routes are compromised. Any ideas?" Colonel Lawson nodded, a slight smile crossing his weathered face. "I might have one. There's an old hunting cabin about 20 miles from here. Off-grid, no official records. I used it for training exercises when you were younger." "I remember," Riley said, memories surfacing of weekends spent learning survival skills in the wilderness. "Will it be secure enough?" "It's not about the location," her father replied. "It's about buying enough time for Bennett's contact to mobilize official protection. Once the Inspector General is involved, only Warner will have to back off or risk exposing the entire operation." Bennett finished his call, his expression reflecting both concern and hope. "Inspector General Blackwood is activating his rapid response team. They'll meet us at coordinates of our choosing in 90 minutes. He's also contacting the FBI director, directly bypassing the chain of command that might include Warner's allies." Riley felt a surge of cautious optimism. If they could evade Warner's forces for 90 minutes, they might actually succeed in exposing Undertow without sacrificing their own safety. Her thoughts turned briefly to Nathan, to the wedding reception she had abandoned, to the life she had planned to build away from the dangers of military service. That dream seemed distant, now possibly lost forever. But in its place was something equally important, a chance to secure justice for her fallen teammates and to expose a system that had betrayed the very principles it claimed to defend. As Colonel Lawson navigated the rural roads leading deeper into the mountains, Riley noticed headlights gaining on them from behind multiple vehicles moving at high speed. "We've got company," she announced, checking her weapon again. "At least 3 vehicles closing fast." "Hold on," Colonel Lawson warned, as he executed a sharp turn onto a narrow Forest Service road, gravel spraying from beneath their tires. The SUV bounced over the rough terrain branches, scraping against the windows as they plunged deeper into the darkness. The pursuing vehicles hesitated at the turn-off, their headlights illuminating the dust cloud left by Colonel Lawson's maneuver. Then with determined precision, they followed their powerful engines, roaring as they gave chase. "They're still on us," Bennett reported, watching through the rear window. "These guys are professionals." "So are we," Riley replied calmly, her mind already formulating tactical options. "Dad, remember that creek crossing about 2 miles in, the one with the fallen redwood?" Colonel Lawson nodded, understanding immediately. "Might buy us some time. Bennett, there's a go bag under your seat. Basic tactical gear. Get ready." Bennett retrieved the bag, finding night vision goggles, communications equipment, and additional ammunition. "You came prepared," he observed with newfound respect. "Old habits," Colonel Lawson replied as he navigated the increasingly rugged terrain. "When your daughter is a special operations expert who leaves her wedding to conduct a hostage rescue, you learn to anticipate complications." The forest road narrowed further, becoming little more than a game trail as they approached a shallow creek crossing. The headlights behind them were closer now, their pursuers clearly familiar with the terrain. "Here we go," Colonel Lawson announced as they reached the creek. Instead of crossing, he abruptly turned the SUV to follow the watercourse, driving directly through the shallow stream with water spraying from the wheels. After several hundred yards, he guided the vehicle behind a massive fallen redwood that created a natural barrier alongside the creek. Cutting the engine and lights, he turned to Riley and Bennett. "This is where we split up," he said decisively. "They'll expect us to continue running. Instead, we're going to set an ambush and neutralize their vehicles." Riley nodded, already removing her tactical gear from another bag stowed in the vehicle. "Non-lethal only," she specified. "These are still federal agents, even if they're following questionable orders." "Agreed," her father confirmed. "Disable vehicles, create confusion, then extract to the cabin on foot. We only need to delay them long enough for the Inspector General's team to reach us." Bennett looked between father and daughter, clearly impressed by their synchronized planning. "What do you need me to do?" "You're our insurance policy," Riley told him. "If anything happens to us, you need to get that data device to Inspector General Blackwood. The undertow files are what matter here, not our safety." Bennett's expression hardened with newfound resolve. "Nothing's going to happen to either of you. Not on my watch." For the first time that evening, Riley felt a genuine connection with the Marine officer who had so casually dismissed her capabilities just hours earlier. Sometimes it took a real crisis to reveal a person's true character. "Let's move," Colonel Lawson instructed. "They'll reach the creek crossing in less than 2 minutes." Riley and her father slipped into the darkness, moving with the silent efficiency of experienced operators, while Bennett maintained a position near the SUV, ready to extract with the data device if necessary. From her concealed position along the creek bank, Riley watched as the pursuing vehicles reached the crossing, their headlights sweeping across the water in search of tracks. The lead vehicle's door opened, and a man in tactical gear emerged, scanning the area with professional precision. "Tracks lead into the creek," he reported into a radio. "They're trying to mask their direction." From the second vehicle, a familiar figure emerged, Charles Warner himself, his suit replaced by tactical clothing that suggested he was no stranger to field operations despite his senior government position. "They can't have gone far," Warner instructed. "Fan out and search both directions along the creek. They have sensitive materials that pose a critical national security risk. Authorized to use necessary force to recover those materials." Riley's grip tightened on her weapon. Warner was setting the stage for a potentially lethal confrontation, framing their possession of the undertow files as a national security threat that justified extreme measures. As the federal agents began to deploy along the creek, Riley caught her father's eye across the water. With silent signals developed over years of training together, they coordinated their approach. Timing would be critical. Colonel Lawson moved first, slipping behind the lead vehicle and quietly placing a small device beneath its undercarriage, an EMP disruptor that would temporarily disable its electronic systems. Riley mirrored his actions with the third vehicle, while Warner and his team continued their search along the creek banks. Just as they were about to neutralize Warner's vehicle, a twig snapped somewhere in the darkness. One of the agents spun toward the sound, his tactical light illuminating Bennett's position near the fallen redwood. "Contact!" the agent shouted, raising his weapon. Riley acted instinctively, abandoning stealth for speed. She triggered both EMP devices simultaneously, plunging the area into darkness as the vehicle's electrical systems failed and their lights went out. In the sudden confusion, she moved toward Bennett's position, providing covering fire with precise shots that forced the agents to take cover without risking lethal injuries. "Move!" she shouted to Bennett, who was already retreating into the forest with the data device secure. Colonel Lawson appeared from the darkness on the opposite side of the clearing, creating a second axis of fire that further disoriented Warner's team. His shots, like Riley's, were placed with surgical precision to create maximum confusion without causing serious harm. "Fall back to extraction point Bravo," he called to Riley, using their pre-established code for the hunting cabin. As Riley began her withdrawal, she caught sight of Warner crouched behind his disabled vehicle, speaking urgently into a satellite phone. Despite the chaos around him, his expression remained coldly determined, a man accustomed to controlling events from behind the scenes now forced into direct confrontation. Their eyes met briefly across the darkened clearing, and Riley saw something unexpected in Warner's gaze, not just anger or frustration, but genuine fear. The kind of fear that came from recognizing that decades of careful planning and secret operations might finally be exposed to public scrutiny. That fear confirmed what Riley already suspected. The undertow files contained information damaging enough to bring down not just Warner, but an entire shadow network of operatives and officials who had operated outside legal constraints for decades. As she melted into the forest darkness, moving with the silent efficiency that had earned her the call sign Viper during her military career, Riley felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The tide was turning. For the first time since Prague, since the death of her teammates, she was taking control of the narrative, rather than being controlled by it. The hunting cabin was 3 miles through difficult terrain, a challenging journey in the darkness, but one that played to Riley's strengths as a special operations veteran. She moved efficiently through the underbrush, maintaining awareness of her surroundings, while conserving energy for the confrontation she knew was still to come. Warner wouldn't give up easily. A man who had protected Undertow for decades would have a contingency plan's resources that extended beyond the small team he had brought to the creek. The 90 minutes until the Inspector General's team arrived would be the most dangerous of Riley's career. But she wasn't alone anymore. Bennett had proven himself a valuable ally, setting aside his prejudices to stand with her against corruption. Her father provided the steady presence that had guided her throughout her life, his principles unwavering despite the pressures and compromises that had corrupted so many others in the intelligence community. And somewhere in the darkness, Agent Chen was making her way to the rendezvous point, bringing additional FBI resources that Warner couldn't control. As Riley approached the hunting cabin, she saw it nestled among the trees, a small structure, barely visible in the moonlight. Colonel Lawson and Bennett had already arrived, securing the perimeter with the practiced efficiency of experienced military operators. "Warner's team is regrouping," Riley reported as she joined them. "He was on a satellite phone before I withdrew. We should expect additional forces, possibly air support." Colonel Lawson nodded grimly. "This location won't remain secure for long. We need to prepare for immediate extraction once the Inspector General's team arrives." Bennett checked his watch. 43 minutes until they reach us. "Can we hold out that long?" "We don't have a choice," Riley replied, checking her remaining ammunition. "The Undertow files are the only leverage we have against Warner and his network. Without them, it's just our word against a deputy national security advisor." Inside the small cabin, they established defensive positions with clear fields of fire covering all potential approaches. The structure itself offered minimal protection against a determined assault, but their advantage lay in the difficult terrain and their superior knowledge of the environment. As they settled into watchful silence, Riley found herself reflecting on the events that had brought her to this moment. Just hours earlier, she had been celebrating her wedding, preparing to begin a new chapter of her life, away from the dangers and demands of military service. Now she was holed up in a remote cabin, facing off against corrupt elements of the very government she had sworn to defend. "Thinking about Nathan?" her father asked quietly, reading her expression with the insight of someone who had known her all her life. Riley nodded. "I left him at our wedding reception to save a senator who turned out to be complicit in the deaths of my teammates. Now I'm a fugitive from the people I used to work for. Not exactly the honeymoon we planned." Colonel Lawson placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Nathan knew who you were when he married you. A warrior doesn't stop being a warrior just because they take off the uniform." "But is that fair to him?" Riley asked, voicing the doubt that had been growing since she left the reception. "To be married to someone who will always answer when duty calls, even on her wedding day?" "That's a question only Nathan can answer," her father replied. "But I know this, you couldn't have lived with yourself if you'd stayed at that reception while Hayes was in danger, no matter what you discovered afterward." Before Riley could respond, Bennett signaled from his position by the window. "Movement in the trees 300 yards out. Multiple targets approaching in standard tactical formation." Riley moved to a different window, using her night vision goggles to scan the approach. "I count 8 operators, full tactical gear. These aren't the same agents from before. They're moving like Tier 1 operators." "Warner's calling in his special teams," Colonel Lawson observed grimly. "These will be Undertow assets, not regular federal agents. They won't be constrained by standard rules of engagement." The implication was clear. The approaching team would be authorized to use lethal force and would not hesitate to do so. The stakes had just escalated dramatically. 38 minutes until extraction," Bennett reported, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "How do you want to play this?" Riley assessed their tactical options with the cold precision of someone who had faced similar situations throughout her military career. They were outnumbered and outgunned, facing elite operators with superior resources. A direct confrontation would be suicidal. We need to change the battlefield, she decided. They're expecting us to make a stand here. Instead, we're going to execute a fighting withdrawal toward the extraction point using the terrain to our advantage. Colonel Lawson nodded in agreement. There's a ridgeline 2 miles north that provides multiple escape routes and defensible positions. If we can reach it before they realize we've abandoned the cabin, we can maintain distance until extraction. Bennett checked his weapon. What about the cabin? They'll know immediately if it's empty. A slight smile crossed Riley's face. Not if they think it might be booby-trapped. Dad, do you still keep those hunting supplies in the storage shed? Colonel Lawson matched her smile with one of his own, including the emergency flares and animal deterrent alarms, enough to create quite a distraction. Perfect, Riley nodded. We rig the cabin to create the impression of defensive preparations, then slip out the back before they complete their approach. The flares and alarms will buy us additional time while they assess potential threats. As they quickly gathered their essential gear and prepared the distractions, Riley maintained situational awareness of the approaching team. They were moving methodically, clearly expecting a defended position rather than a tactical withdrawal. Ready, Colonel Lawson announced, having rigged a series of tripwires connected to flares and noise-making devices throughout the cabin. These won't harm anyone, but they'll create enough chaos to mask our direction of travel. With practiced efficiency, the three operators slipped out of the cabin's rear entrance, using the dense forest to conceal their movement. They had covered less than 100 yards when the first team member reached the cabin's perimeter. Hold, Riley whispered, signaling her father and Bennett to freeze in place. Let them commit to the approach before we continue. Through her night vision goggles, she watched as the tactical team established a perimeter around the cabin, communicating with hand signals that confirmed their professional training. These were indeed elite operators, likely drawn from the same special operations community Riley had served in. A pang of regret shot through her at the realization that she was now opposing men and women who, like her, had sworn an oath to defend their country. The corruption of Undertow had placed loyal operators on opposite sides of a conflict that should never have existed. The tactical team began their final approach to the cabin, moving in coordinated pairs with practiced precision. As the first operator crossed one of Colonel Lawson's tripwires, the night erupted in a cacophony of noise and light. Emergency flares shot skyward, illuminating the clearing in harsh red light, while multiple alarm devices created a disorienting symphony of sound. The team immediately scattered for cover, their disciplined response confirming Riley's assessment of their training level. But the diversion had served its purpose, creating precious minutes of confusion that the three fugitives used to put distance between themselves and the cabin. Move, Riley urged as they began making their way toward the ridgeline. They'll regroup quickly once they realize it's just noise and light. As they navigated the difficult terrain in the darkness, Riley maintained awareness of their surroundings, alert for any sign that the tactical team had discovered their deception. The ridge was still over a mile away, with challenging elevation changes and dense vegetation that slowed their progress. 25 minutes to extraction, Bennett reported between controlled breaths as they climbed a steep incline. From somewhere behind them came the distinct sound of voices, sharp professional commands that indicated the tactical team had identified their ruse and was now in pursuit. They're on our trail, Riley confirmed. We need to increase our pace. Colonel Lawson, despite being in his 60s, moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who had maintained peak physical conditioning throughout his life. Bennett kept pace admirably, showing no signs of the arrogance that had characterized his behavior at the wedding reception. This shared danger had stripped away pretenses, revealing the core qualities that defined each of them as soldiers. As they reached a small clearing near the base of the ridge, a sound overhead caused Riley to freeze in place. The distinctive whump-whump of helicopter rotors cut through the night air, growing louder by the second. "Warner's called in air support," she warned. "Find cover immediately." They scattered toward the tree line as a powerful spotlight swept the clearing, its harsh beam cutting through the darkness like a physical force. The helicopter circled overhead, its infrared sensors scanning for heat signatures in the forest below. "This complicates things," Colonel Lawson observed dryly as they huddled beneath the dense canopy of an ancient pine. "They can track our movement from above and direct the ground team to our position." Riley assessed their options with the calm clarity that came from years of operating under extreme pressure. The helicopter changed the tactical equations, significantly eliminating many of their advantages of terrain knowledge and stealth. We need to split up, she decided. Multiple targets will force them to divide their resources. No, Bennett objected immediately. We stay together. Better chance of fighting our way out if necessary. This isn't about fighting, Riley explained. It's about ensuring the Undertow files reach the Inspector General. That's the mission now. Understanding dawned in Bennett's eyes. You're talking about a decoy strategy. Riley nodded. Dad and I will move toward the ridge from different directions, creating multiple heat signatures for their sensors to track. You take the data device and head directly to the extraction coordinates. I'm not leaving you behind, Bennett protested, but there was less conviction in his voice. He understood the tactical logic, even if he didn't like it. You're not, Riley assured him. You're completing the mission. Everything we've done tonight, leaving my wedding, extracting Hayes, confronting Warner, none of it matters if those files don't reach someone who can act on them. Colonel Lawson placed a hand on Bennett's shoulder. Sometimes the hardest part of being a soldier is knowing when not to fight. Today your duty is to ensure the truth reaches those who can protect it. After a moment of internal struggle, Bennett nodded. I'll get it done. You have my word. Riley handed him the data device, entrusting the evidence that could expose decades of corruption to the man who had dismissed her capabilities just hours earlier. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Extraction coordinates are 2 miles northeast, she instructed. Stay low, use the creek bed for cover where possible, and maintain communication silence unless absolutely necessary. Bennett accepted the device with solemn determination. What's your plan? We'll create enough noise and movement to keep their attention focused on us, Colonel Lawson explained. Once you've cleared the area, we'll disengage and make our own way to secondary extraction points. The helicopter made another pass overhead, its spotlight sweeping dangerously close to their position. Time was running short. 15 minutes to extraction, Bennett noted, checking his watch one final time. That's cutting it close. We've worked with worse odds, Riley replied with the quiet confidence of someone who had repeatedly defied statistical probabilities throughout her career. Now go. We'll cover your withdrawal. With a final nod of respect, soldier to soldier, professional to professional, Bennett disappeared into the darkness, moving with the careful precision he had likely learned during his own combat deployments. Riley turned to her father, their eyes meeting in silent communication that transcended words. They were about to implement a high-risk diversion against elite operators with air support and superior numbers. The odds of both of them reaching safety were minimal. Just like old times, Colonel Lawson said with a slight smile, referring to the training exercises they had conducted throughout Riley's childhood and adolescence. Except the opposition has real bullets this time, Riley replied, returning his smile despite the gravity of their situation. They always did, her father revealed quietly. I just never told you. Before Riley could process this surprising disclosure, the helicopter made another pass, this time hovering directly above their position. They had been spotted. Time to move, Colonel Lawson announced. North and south maximum confusion rendezvous at Point Echo if separated. See you on the other side, Riley promised as they prepared to break cover in opposite directions. As they burst from their concealment, sprinting in diverging paths that would force their pursuers to divide their resources, Riley felt an unexpected sense of clarity. Throughout her military career, she had executed countless missions, followed innumerable orders, and served with unwavering dedication. But this mission, exposing the corruption that had led to her teammates' deaths, confronting the system that had betrayed the principles she had sworn to defend, this was perhaps the most important operation of her life. Not because it served national security as traditionally defined, but because it served the deeper truth that made national security meaningful in the first place. As the helicopter spotlight locked onto her position and the sounds of pursuit grew closer, Riley Lawson ran not as someone fleeing justice, but as a warrior moving purposefully toward it. The truth about Operation Undertow would reach those with the authority to act, and the ghost protocol that had claimed so many lives would finally be exposed to the light. The real battle, the one for accountability and justice, was just beginning, and Riley was ready.